All right, is my screen visible?
Yeah, storage account.
Great.
Yes, Raghu.
All right, so let's talk about storage accounts. Now, what storage accounts are? This is storage service in Azure. This is an object storage service, and we can actually store data, our virtual machine, hard disk on the storage account. So this service comes handy. I'm saying we have been using storage services, cloud storage services like OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, and other storage services. This is also similar, however, with additional benefits. Additional benefits in terms of access, in terms of scalability, in terms of durability, in terms of service level that you get, in terms of optimized cost. And so it is available at a very reasonable cost as compared to the other storage services which are available. So that's the storage services in Azure. And as I said, we use this to actually, store our data. That data could be in the form of a file. It could be a folder. It could be, a Word document, a PowerPoint slide, an Excel sheet. It could be a PDF document. It could be an image. It could be a video. It could be anything. So that's what we use storage services for. And there are different types of storage services which are available in Azure. We'll just go through all of them. So the most popular storage service in Azure is Blob. Let's move on to. So introduction to storage accounts. Now, how do we consume storage services from Azure? We basically create a storage account. When we create a storage account, we primarily select the type of storage that we want to leverage, that we want to consume from Azure platform. So that's what storage account offers. So storage account is of different types. I would say we have, storage account, which is general purpose V1. It's a legacy storage account. This type of storage account was available a couple of years, for almost couple of years, I would say, when Azure got started. And then Microsoft came up with another type, which is general purpose V2. V2 is the latest version of storage account with additional capabilities. Then we have block storage account, file storage account. So these are these storage types. Now, there are multiple ways. So I'll explain this slide in detail here. Now, when you create a storage account, what happens? You also need to select what kind of data you are putting into that storage account and what is the performance you need from that storage account and what should be the durability. Durability in the sense, how many copies of that data should Microsoft create and store so that if one copy is lost or corrupted, you can at least retrieve your data from other copies. So that's what replication is. Then comes the access tier. Access tier means the data that I'm going to put, the data that I'm going to upload, or the data that I'm going to create in Microsoft Azure storage service. How frequently will I be accessing that data? Will I be accessing it every day, once in a week, once in 30 days, once in 6 months, once in a year? So that's access tier. So depending on what service I want to use, what performance I need, what access tier I will go for, what is the durability, and what deployment model, I will pick and choose a type of service in storage account. So there are 4 types of storage account basically. I would say 4 types of services are there in the storage account. We have containers, we have table storage, queue storage, and file share. So these are the 4 types of storage services which are available. Now, when it comes to replication, let's understand what replication is, and these are the models. So when it comes to, let's forget about V1. Let's not read anything which is legacy, because you will not be using it. And now that you have started to learn Azure, by the time you get into the production, nobody will be talking about. So let's not talk about V1, but you can see in general purpose V2 storage account. Storage account is nothing but like a folder, like a resource group in which you create the services. So we have blob, file, queue, data, disk, data lake. Data lake is another type of storage. The performance tier is standard and premium. The access tier is hot, cool, and archive. I'll talk about what they are. And these are the replication topology, and this is the deployment model. So resource manager deployment model is what we have been using right from day one. And say, when you provision your first service, you used resource manager, because the classic we don't use at all. Okay. Now core storage services. So Azure has 5 core storage services. First is blob. So blob is first service. Blob is of two types: page blob and block blob. These are the two types of blob that we have. In page blob, we basically keep our virtual machines VHD. So the hard disk of your virtual machine is kept in page blob. If you're not using managed disk, the virtual machines that we have created so far, we were using a managed disk, which is managed by Microsoft. But you can also create your virtual machine and put virtual machine VHD or the disk in a storage account, which is known as unmanaged disk. So that's page blob. Then comes block blob. Block blob, we keep any discrete file, discrete object. It could be a Word document, PowerPoint, Excel, PDF, image, video, executable, etc. That's what blob is all about. So this is the blob service, two types of blob: page blob, which is primarily used for keeping virtual machine hard disk, and blob in which you keep discrete object, anything that you want to upload in Azure, you basically upload here. That's blob. That's the first service. Then comes the second service, which is Azure Files. Now this Azure File is similar to file servers that you use on premises. So in your organization, you may have a couple of file servers. And if you need to access file servers, you basically type like this in C drive or in start run, you basically type // and file server name, and then you basically type if there is a specific folder or file which is there. So that's the terminology that you follow. That's for file server. Azure also provides you file services, which is similar to file servers on premises, with one difference. That difference is no more available. I mean, it doesn't make it is no more applicable. Basically, what happens in a file server, which is a common repository, document repository, you basically create a couple of folders, and inside those folders you keep data, and then you basically assign permissions on the folder. So on a file server, you can have folders related to HR, marketing, finance, admin, operations. However, you will not be able to double click and actually see what's there in HR, what's there in marketing, depending on the permissions that has been applied, which is known as NTFS permissions. So file servers, on-premises file servers have this capability that you can actually assign NTFS permissions on the files and folders, so that all people who have access to file server will only be able to access the files that they have been assigned permissions to. That's typical file server. Now what happens in Azure? In Azure, you also create a similar structure. And what you can do, you can map your file server on your system. You can create a network drive that is nothing but your file server, right? Now in Azure, you also create file service. So Azure provides you a file service, and the limit of this file service is 5 terabyte for one file service. You can create multiple if you need. Microsoft keeps on enhancing the limit. That's the default limit. And in that file service, you can create multiple folders, and you can assign those folders to individual users. Now, if you need that, you can create folders, and people can actually map those file servers or file services to their individual system, and they can access the data. Then comes the portion permission. So permission can also be taken care of. You can actually integrate your file services with Azure AD, and most recently, Microsoft has also allowed or enabled integration for on-premises Active Directory domain service. So you can integrate your file services with Azure AD and on-premises AD, and then you can also assign permissions to the folder. So that's the capability that file services is all about. And Azure files, if you're using on-premises file servers and you are moving to Azure, you don't need to bring that, bring your file servers into Azure. You can directly copy the data in Azure file service and you can start using it. It's a fully managed service from Azure, which means you don't need to worry about the availability, permissions, security, redundancy, and all. So that's the another service. Then comes the next service, which is Azure Queues. Now, Azure Queues is a NoSQL store. People who are from database background, they understand database are of two types: relational database management system, wherever which is based on rows and tables, and those rows and columns. Those rows and columns have data which is related to one another. For example, a student file which has student name, student roll number, student address, student stream, and other information. Then there are non-relational database management solutions, which do not work on that relational basis. They are non-relational. I will not get into the details of it. So if you need a NoSQL store, if you have some data which is schema-less, which does not have relations, you can actually use Azure Queues for it. Then Azure Tables, a messaging store for reliable messaging between application components. So that's Azure Tables. Then comes the Azure Disk, which is block level storage volume for Azure VMs. This is incorrect. This is block basically. I will fix it. So that's the core services of Azure: blob, files, queues, tables, and disk. Disk you already know. Okay, so this basically talks about this is right, guys. This is managed disk basically. This is talking about managed disk, and managed disk are block level storage, not blob. Blob is unmanaged disk always. Okay. Then comes performance tier. As I said, there are two types of performance tiers. One is standard, the other is premium. Standard is based on hard disk drive. So if you take a standard storage account, if you create a standard storage account, Microsoft will allocate a storage hardware to you, which is based on hard disk drive. Multiple hard disk drives are configured in RAID configuration. You will be given space on that hard disk drive if you take standard performance. If you take premium performance, you will be given access to SSDs, solid state drives. And if you not already know, SSDs are more reliable. They have more performance. However, they are a bit costlier as well. So that SSDs have higher disk read and write byte per second, which means SSDs, if you have some data on SSDs, you can read more data and you can write more data per second on an SSD as compared to HDD, hard disk drive. So that's the differentiation between performance, premium, and standard. Let's give it a quick read, then we'll move on to the next slide. Let me know if you have any questions on this. Now you will find some of the information in the previous deck that I had shared with you, which is a common deck for all the services. And this is a storage specific deck. So, but the information is the same. Here we have more information about storage. There we have some high level information. So if you ask from production perspective, the production applications or the data that relates to production applications, we primarily keep in SSDs. SSDs are of multiple types. We have standard SSD, we have premium SSD, and we have ultra disk. So SSDs have different variations or different varieties, and every variety has some additional capabilities to offer. But as I said, when you go with premium, you pay more. Premium performance is not the criteria. If you are doing some POC, if you're doing a test staging or development project, I would rather suggest you to use HDDs. instead of SSDs. But for production environment, for databases, you should use SSDs because on databases, you read a lot of information and you write a lot of information every second. So SSD should be used. Moving on. Then comes the access tier. So performance, we are done that performance is of two types, standard and premium. Then comes the access tier. Access tier is of three types: hot, cool, and archive. Hot, it basically means data that we access frequently, like virtual machines. So when we connect to our virtual machines, when we actually double click on a drive, read some files from it, or write some data on it, store some data, that's hot tier. So virtual machine disks are by default kept in hot tier. We use hot tier for storing data which is most frequently used. Hot tier has highest cost and lowest access cost. I'll talk about access cost in another tier. So what kind of data you can keep in hot tier, or what could be the use case? Data that's in active use or expected to be accessed frequently, and data that's staged for processing and eventual migration to the cool tier. Now, what happens? Let's say you put some data in the hot tier, then you feel that I don't need to use this data more frequently now. This is, let's say, a backup data. You can actually move it to cool tier. Now, what is cool tier? Cool tier is applicable for a data type that you infrequently access and you basically access it once in 30 days. That's for cool tier. And cool tier has lower storage cost and higher access cost. What kind of data you can keep? Short-term backup and disaster recovery data sets, older media content, large data sets. That's the use case for cool. Then comes archive tier. You still need to maintain some data for historical purpose, for audit perspective, to be shown to auditors. When the audit happens once in a year or twice or once in 2 years, you can keep that data into archive storage. Archive storage is the lowest storage cost, however, the highest access cost. And typically, you keep data in archive storage which you don't use, which you primarily use once in 6 months. That's archive data. Now, what is this access cost? Access cost means when you read data. So you basically store data. Let's say I store 1 TB of data today, and then I forget about it. That's storage cost. I'll pay storage cost for 1 TB. But when I access that data, when I double click on those files, when I download those files, read those files, that means access cost. So what happens when you keep something in the hot tier? You pay extra, you pay highest storage cost, but the access cost is very low. I'm saying you are given some 2,000, 20,000 read operations free of cost, and then for every additional read operation, you pay less. When you keep some data in cool storage, you pay less for the storage, but when you access that data, the access cost is higher. Then archive storage. In archive storage, you cannot read the data directly. In order to read the data, you will first need to move it to hot storage or cool storage, then only you can read the data. Now, the equivalent of the storage in Amazon is S3 bucket with frequent access, cool is S3 bucket with infrequent access, and archive is Glacier. So these are the three types of access tiers. You can configure automation if you have some data that is only accessed frequently for 30 days, then you can move it to cool tier after the period of 30 days, and then after 60 days you can move it to archive tier. So you can also bring that automation. Now, what are the use case for archive? Any data that you need to retain for long-term backup, secondary backup, or archival data. Any data that you need to preserve it, and any data which relates to compliance. So that's the typical use cases for access tier. Any question on access tier? All right. If you don't have any questions, let's move. Then comes the Now, then this is more on the access tier. We'll talk about it when we do the lab. Then comes replication and data. Now, what replication is? Replication means when you create a storage account, let's say you create a storage account with standard performance, hot tier, and you upload some data on it. You upload some 500 GB of data, which is a couple of files, a couple of folders, different types of files, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and whatnot. Now, then there are different options to create multiple copies of that data. So if you select LRS, which is locally redundant storage, or ZRS, this is the, so what they will do, they will keep that data in the same data center. So if you are using East US as your location, in East US, the same data center where the storage account is created, they will keep 3 copies of that data. If you need that data to be copied to a secondary region within the same geography, which means to West US, South Central US, West US too. In the secondary region, you will select geo-redundant storage. That's the, and what Microsoft will do, Microsoft will keep 3 copies in the same data center, which is synchronous replicated, and 3 additional copies in a different data center within the same geography, but in a different region, like East, if your primary region is East US, then your secondary region will be West US. So 3 additional copies will be kept in West US. They will be asynchronous copies. That's what secondary, that's what geo redundant is. And if you need read access means, now what happens, understand here. Let's say you're keeping your copies in locally redundant. There are 3 copies, and the data center and a specific hardware, or a rack, a storage rack goes down. Microsoft will still give you access. Microsoft will still give you access from the additional copies, right? When that rack is repaired. Here, 6 copies. The difference between first two and last one is that the secondary region redundancy with read access is the same as secondary region. The only difference is that if there's a disaster, if something goes wrong, Microsoft will give you read access of your data from the secondary region. In the first two options, you don't get read access. Here you get read access also. Now, if you look at the price, $1, $2, $3, it's like $10, then it's $20, it's $30. So the cost increases when you need more capability. That's the redundancy is all about. The greater level of redundancy, the more expensive the cost of replication. So that's the option. Now there is one more type of replication, which is cross-region replication. If you remember when we were doing backup, we get this option of cross-region replication. So cross-region replication, what it does, it also replicates your data to a secondary region, which is once again East US to West US, and you can actually restore your data to that region. In this case, your restoration will happen in the same region. For example, you are storing some data in Azure, and you are using LRS, which means the data as well as 3 copies of that data in the same data center. If you need to restore it, you will restore it in the same data center. Here, 3 copies are in a different data center in the same across the region. But even though if you want to restore from the backup, your restore will happen in the same region, same primary region, which is East US. And in this case, third case, if you need access, read access, you will get, and then you can restore it in the same region. But in case of cross-region replication, you can actually restore your data to a secondary region, which means your data, your primary data source could be in East US, but when you have cross-region replication enabled, you can restore that data into West US. But it's very expensive solution. Replication methods or replication options which are available in Azure, and you know production applications. I'll tell you something from my experience. There is absolutely no usage of secondary region redundancy and read access. Why? Because Even if you get read access to your data, what will you do? What is the point of getting read access and paying a lot of money? What is the point of GRS when you cannot restore it? The restore will only happen in the primary region, and if there's a disaster, unless and until your primary region comes back, you have no access to your data. You're just sitting. So that's the reason, from my observation, I've seen there is absolutely no benefit of this strategy unless and until your data is very critical, and even if you can't access it, but you need it stored somewhere, then you should go for GRS or RAGRS. Most of the customers in production environment, in fact, I recommend them to go with LRS to actually reduce cost of storage. So that's all about replication and data redundancy. When it comes to residency, as I said, in in any case, data will continue to remain in the same geography. Microsoft will not copy or move your data from US to Europe or APAC in any case, under any circumstances. Microsoft will not do that because Microsoft is complied to data residency regulations. Uh, so don't worry on that part. But as a customer, yes, you can always copy your data from one place to another. If you remember, we did a lab wherein I moved one disk from East US to West Europe. So I, as a customer, can do it, but Microsoft will not do it ever. Any question on this, guys?
So good.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Now this image talks in detail at how it happens. So you can see locally redundant storage. This is your primary region and 3 copies are kept. Zone redundant storage, your copies are kept in multiple availability zones, but in the same region. So redundancy in the primary region, data is replicated 3 times in the primary region. These are 2 options for storing in the primary region. LRS is what most of the customers go for because it creates 3 copies, saves, stores it in the same region, same data center, and this is the availability SLA that you get. It is 11 times 9, so 99999, 11 times 9 durability, and it's the cheapest option. Then there is zone redundant storage, wherein you store your data in availability zone. Availability zone basically means, if you remember, in one region there could be 3 data centers. They can be marked as availability zone 1, 2, and 3, which means your virtual machines will be provisioned across those data centers. So if you select locally redundant storage, then all the 3 copies of your data will be saved in the same data center in that region. But if you select zone redundant storage, then those 3 copies will be kept across data centers in the same region. That's the only difference. Now, how it helps? If that data center, primary data center is down, or if there's a power that breaks down and converts everything to ashes, your data is gone. But in case of zone redundant, even if primary data center is down, one of the data center, your data is still there in other 2 data centers. So you will still be able to restore your data when Microsoft brings up the primary region. That's the difference between locally redundant and zone redundant. Zone redundant gives you 12 nines. This gives you 11 nines. This is a bit expensive. I will not say very expensive, a bit expensive. I'm saying if this is $1, this is $1.2. That's the difference. Then comes redundancy in secondary region. If you take secondary region, this is how it is. So 3 copies in primary region, 3 copies in secondary region. If it is GRS, data is copied synchronously in primary region, and here it is asynchronous copy. Asynchronous means that, let's say there is some data that changes here. The data will be copied over to the secondary region, but it will not impact the primary source of data. The primary source will continue to work. That's asynchronous. In synchronous, unless and until the copy operation completes and you get the acknowledgement, you cannot, this will not be completed. So it's like if I write A here, A will get copied here, and unless and until it gets copied and this source confirms, it will not be completed. So that's synchronous and asynchronous. So GRS gives you 16 nines. 16 times 9 durability. You must be thinking that what is the benefit of 16 nines, 20 nines, 11 nines, 9 is 9. And so there is a lot of benefit when you compare it for a year, that 4 times 9 means 4 hours of downtime. And if it is 14 times 9, then it will be in minutes. So once a couple of minutes of downtime once in 365 days is what it means. So yes, there's a significance of it. Then comes geo zone redundant. As I said, there is no difference. The only difference is the availability zone. That here is the concept of availability zone. Then comes RAGRS. In RAGRS, the process remains the same. Process of copying remain the same, synchronous, asynchronous. However, the difference is that you get read-only access. So your data will be in sync with your primary and you will have read access. That's the only difference that that it makes. But because of this difference, they charge you a lot of money. So customers do not primarily go for this option. And an update for you. Microsoft has most recently deprecated this option because no customer was using it. They were just unnecessarily putting infrastructure to accommodate this feature. So Microsoft has actually deprecated this option in some of the reasons now. You will not find this option in some of the reasons. When we create our first storage account, we'll see if we are getting this option. Okay. Then comes blob. As I told you, blob is an object store. An object could be a file, a discrete file, or it could be a VHD. It could be a structured data. I'm saying it is always an unstructured data, the blob, because there is no structure to it. It could be text, binary, whatever. And you basically create a storage account. Inside that storage account, you create containers. Containers are nothing but folders. And inside folders, you keep blob, like images, video files. We'll do that. And storage account in Azure is publicly accessible. When I say publicly accessible, you can access your storage account or data kept inside your storage account from anywhere in the world by using a URL. That URL is this. It is HTTPS because storage accounts are secure by default. They are encrypted. So HTTPS, then your storage account name .blob.core.windows.net. That's the common to all the storage accounts. So we'll see when we create a storage account. Blobs are of two types. There is one more type of blob which we don't primarily use. So blob, as I said, is just basically the any text and binary data, which and the maximum size is 4.75 terabyte. And page blob is any random access files like VHDs, which is maximum 8 terabyte in size. And append blob is basically for append operations and ideal for scenarios such as logging data. Any log data, you basically put an append blob. So Microsoft manages it. Now, these are some of the services using which you can actually move data in Azure storage. We can use AZ copy, which is a command line utility that you can run from a command prompt. We have Azure storage data movement library. We have data factory. Through data factory, you can ingest data into Azure. Blob Fuse, Azure Data Box, import export service. In fact, you can use Azure Storage Explorer, which I will talk about. AZ copy is a CUI, character user interface, and Storage Explorer is a GUI based tool. So we will use a GUI based tool to actually show you how to move data into Azure. So we'll upload some data from our system into our Azure storage account, which is equivalent to moving of data. Azure Files, I already talked about it. You can see it. And Azure Files supports both protocol, which is SMB, which we primarily use for Windows servers, and network file system, which we primarily use for Linux systems. These are the use cases for Azure Files. So some information about Azure Files. This is Azure Storage Explorer that I was talking about. We will do this tool today. I'll talk about shared access signature. This is AZ copy example. Okay, great. Enough of theory. Let's do some practical. All right, I'm back to my Azure portal. Now, this is how I create a storage account. So I'll type storage and I'll see the options storage account. Right now, I don't have a storage account. There is no storage account. So I'll create one. Is everyone with me on this?
Yep.
Okay. Let's create a storage account. So we select our subscription, we select our resource group, I select training RG, and I select storage account name. Now, storage account name is unique across Azure, which means you cannot use it, two people cannot have the same storage account. Okay, that's first thing. Second, storage account name has to be in lowercase. It doesn't accept uppercases or a combination. It has to be in lowercase. It can be, and it can be a letter or number, but it cannot be a special character. That's the two things that you need to remember. And there is a limit. So the limit is basically 3 to 24 characters. Yep, 3 to 24. So you can see the field can contain only lowercase letters and numbers. Name must be between 3 and 24 characters. So that's what you need to. For example, if I say Raghuveer Essay and see if the storage account is available. So let's say test essay. See, it says the storage account name is already taken. So which means that one of the Azure customers in any geography is using the storage account already. Test essay. I cannot create a storage account with this name. So I'll select Raghuveer essay. Let's see if it is available. If it is available, you will not get an error. You will not get a checkbox that says that the storage account name is available. But if it is not available, you will get an error. So this storage account name is okay. But the moment I include a special character, I'll get an error. No, I cannot use it. The moment I use a uppercase letter, I'll get an error. So that's not I should be using. Then comes the region. So I'll be using East US. Then comes the performance. We talked about it. We can use standard or premium. I'll go with standard. Then comes redundancy. Look at the options. See, if you look carefully, that RAGRS option is gone. Read access. Because now Microsoft has already deprecated that option. So the options that you have is LRS, GRS, ZRS, and ZZRS. These are the four options. However, if you choose premium tier, then you will only have one option, which is LRS. Since premium is very expensive, Microsoft does not provide you the capability of creating multiple copies. I would say 6 copies of your data and store it in a different region. It will be way too expensive. That's the reason if you select premium performance, your data will always be local to the same data center. It will not get replicated. However, there will be 3 copies, but it will always be in the same data center. So always remember this premium only, premium only support LRS redundancy. However, for standard, you can pick and choose one of these options. All right, so we'll go with standard, we'll go with LRS. Then comes the next option. The next option is we're creating the storage account to store some data. We may have use cases wherein we want this data to be accessible by to be accessible by employees of the organization as well as external parties, vendors. That's the reason these options are here. So it says from security point of view, it says enable block public access. Do you want to enable public access? Yes. By default, it is checked because by default, the storage account is public. So we'll go with the option. However, this is very important. Minimum TLS version. TLS is transport layer security, which is how the data is flowing over the internet, whether or not it is encrypted. So the default version is 1.2. Data lake, I'll not get into the data lake part. Blob storage. So let's go with the default options. It says enable large file share. We'll do it as separate. So we are just doing the, we are not changing anything. I was just explaining the options. And then here, access tier. You can select if it is frequently accessed and day-to-day usage or infrequently accessed. So you can either select hot or cool. If you notice, archive option is not here because archive tier is not an option by default. You actually move data to archive tier manually. So archive tier is not available. We can move data manually to an archive tier. The moment you move that data to an archive tier, Microsoft will stop charging you for the existing tier, whatever it was, hot or cool, and Microsoft will start charging you for the archive tier from that moment onwards. Networking. Now, by default, storage accounts are accessible over public internet, public endpoint, all networks. But you can actually enable, you can actually restrict that access to your network also. That I will do once the storage account is created. Right now, let's go with the default options. Then comes data protection. You already know about soft delete because we did it in recovery services vault. These are the same options here. So by default, it's 7 days. You can increase it. For 7 days, Microsoft doesn't charge you. If you increase the number of days, Microsoft will charge you. So we'll go with the default. Tag we are not putting. Let's review and create. Any questions so far? All right, the validation passed and I hit create. My first storage account is getting created. I hope you all are creating a storage account side by side. Yes, no, maybe?
Yep.
Yes, Raghu.
Okay. All right, so the storage account is created. Let's go to resource and I can go to storage account by clicking on storage account, refresh, and I'll see my storage account here. So I have my storage account, name of the storage account, type, kind V2, resource group, location, and subscription. I have all of this information. I'll click on it, and this takes me to my storage account view. This is my storage account view. On the overview page, I see resource group, location, subscription, ID, disk state, performance. I see here it's standard hot. Replication is LRS. The type is V2. Provisioning state is succeeded, which means the storage account is ready for use. And here's the date of creation. For other services in Azure, you will not see this option date of creation. But for storage account, you will always see it. And there I have personally given a lot of recommendations from here, from feedback section to Microsoft to actually include this capability for all the services so that it becomes easier for you to audit or identify when the service was created. But this capability is only available with storage account, as we said. Okay. Then comes the next properties. Here you see the properties of the storage account, whatever you have shared. Monitoring, you don't get much information, but it basically tells you total egress and ingress. Ingress, when you are reading data, it's basically egress. Ingress, when you are writing data. The latency that you are receiving. So all the information you see here. Right now, it's all blank because you've just created the storage account. You've not started using it. Capabilities, so you can actually create a static website. You can create custom domain, some common options which are there. Recommendations, no. Tutorials, developer tools, leave that part. All right, activity log, I've already told you nothing different. It just tells you if you click on activity log here, it will only give you activity related to the storage account. If you click on activity log in the search, then you get activity for the entire subscription. Tags you already know, diagnose and solve problem, helps you with common issues. Access control, similar. If you need somebody, if you want to give access of the storage account to some user, you can use access control. Data migration, these are for the migration. If you're migrating data, then you need to select scenarios. They have recently added this option. Okay, then comes events, storage explorer, I'll talk about it. Let's go to the containers. So containers is where container is folder container is where we create our blob, right? So we have four options: container, file shares, queues, and tables. Let's click on containers. By default, you will have one container with the logs created. All the activities that you perform with respect to this storage account will be logged here. And the access level of this will be private, which means you cannot access it from external world. You can only access it from here. And this is keeping logs, which is for the security perspective. Now, if you need, you can create a custom container. You can create a container. You can put it a log, name. Now, name of the container will always be anything in the storage account will be in lowercase. Always remember. So I'm putting a container with the name testing. Containers are not unique. You can also create a container with the same name because it's internal to storage account. But nobody in this world, in Azure, world, can create a storage account with this name now because I have taken this storage account. I have actually reserved this name. Okay, then comes the access of this container. By default, private means that nobody will be able to access this container and the data kept inside from external world, but they can actually access it by logging into the portal. That's private. Then comes blob. Blob means that people will still be able to read the data from the containers, from the blob that you're going to create. And container means anybody can do it. So by default, we are going to keep it container level access, which is public. Now, the moment you are doing it, it says that, you know what, anybody can access it. Please be careful. We're doing it by purpose. Okay, then comes advanced encryption scope. If you want to encrypt the storage account, by default, all data in the storage account is encrypted. So you can, by default, it is encrypted. However, if you have your own, if you have your own encryption, keys, you can use it. So testing and access level is container. Then I create it. Okay, I created it. Now I'll go inside the container, and this is the place where I can upload data. You see this upload option is available. You can click on upload and you can upload any data here. So for example, if I want to upload something from my system, I'll go to training, training documents, training, Novel Vista. These are the batches. So this is your batch, September 25th. And I can upload 2 PDF. I can upload 1 test website. I can upload 1 HTML page. I can upload 1 Excel sheet. I can upload 1 small PPT. I'll take 1 PPT. I can upload 1 document, Word document. I can upload 1 text document. See, I've selected all types of data, and I'll just hit open, and I'll just click on upload. That's it. All of these documents are getting uploaded. I've got good speed, and the size of these documents are in KBs. They are uploaded quickly. See, this is how I use storage accounts to store or upload data in the container or blob. Now this is blob. So if you look at the blob type, it is blob. Remember I told you in the notepad that any discrete data is blob. Where's my other notepad? This one? Yep. Any discrete data, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, PDF, image, video, exit table. This is all blob data. So it is a blob, and the type of the blob is blob. So that's the data. Now, let's see how I can move it. So as I said, I cannot create an archive tier, but I can actually move that data to archive tier. So let's say this labs document, I want to move it to archive. Right now it's hot. I'll just click on these 3 horizontal dots here, and there is an option that says change tier here. I can click on this, which will open another window and say, this is hot. You want to move it to cool or archive. I can select archive and I can hit save. That way, this specific is moved to archive tier. Now I cannot access the content of it. If I need to access the content of it, I will actually need to bring it back to either hot or cool tier, then I can only access it. So that's how you change the tier of blob. Let's see how I access the document. Since right now the storage account is the access level of the storage account is public, people can actually access it. So I can quickly show it. So let's say division of responsibility in the cloud. I have this SVG. I'll click on this document. Here's the URL to access it. I'll just copy this URL and I'll put it in the chat window, and all of you can actually access it. Because right now the access level is public. You can just copy it on your system, just copy from chat, put it onto the browser and hit enter. You should be able to access it. See, I just accessed it. I can see it here. This is an image which shows me the responsibility in the cloud. You all will be able to do it. Can you double check it?
I get blob not found.
Yeah, Henry, can you just copy paste the whole this thing?
Yeah, you need to copy it properly.
Yeah, it's working for me.
I'll try it again.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I get the same.
Great. Anyone can access this actually, because as I said, storage account is public in
Oh,
and the
I
access
see.
right now is public. So, but you will only be able to access it when I share the URL, because that URL is only available to me. Okay, great. Let's close this. Now, let's change the access level for a moment. Now I'm changing the access level from container to private, and I hit OK. Great, it is done. Now you refresh your browser, all of you. You will not be able to access that document any further because I've just changed the access level.
Yeah, not able to access now.
You will get an error basically.
Yeah, XML
Yep.
not found.
Yes.
Yep, you will get this error that it is not found. So I've just given you a use case. Let's say you want to share something with someone and you only want to share it for some time, for a specific, for a couple of minutes, or let's say for an hour. This is what you can do. Upload that data into the storage account, share the URL with the person. That person will be reading it, I'm say accessing it, and then you change the access level once again. Done. They will not be able to access it. You want to share some data with your vendors, with your partners, do it like that. And you're sharing it over a encrypted channel. This data is encrypted. They will only have access to it because they only have the URL. However, if I have the URL, I can also access it. So that's the thing. Guys, I need 10 minutes of breather real quick. So let's you can create storage account. You can test it by uploading some data and changing the access tier by yourself. And then I'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Raghu.
Okay, so did you try that? That when you change the access level, the blob or the documents are not accessible over the internet. Now this is one option. There is another option. What you can do here. So this is at the blob level. Now, when you change the access at the blob level, you can have the documents available or hidden. Now there are other security options because even if you make it private, even if you change the access level to private, right now it is container. Even if you make it private, the storage account will still be accessible, right? People can still access it from basically from by using the Azure portal. But let's say you want to restrict that access also. I'm talking about the data. So what you can do, storage account also gives you a couple of options on this security, because we are talking about data here. We use storage account to keep to store data, and data is of utmost criticality to any organization. They need to protect data. So you have a couple of options. security plus networking. Now, when you click on security plus networking, click on networking. Here is the option that I left when we provisioned the storage account. Firewalls and virtual network. Now it says, right now, if you look carefully, it says allow access from all network. And that is the reason when I shared the URL of that document with you, you all were able to access it because by default, storage account has a firewall in backend, which is allowing access from all networks. But here you can click on selected network. Let's say you want to allow access from a selected network. So you can select, you can check the radio button that says selected network. And here you can add the network. I would say if you want, let's say you have a couple of virtual machines in your storage account. I'm sorry, a couple of virtual machines in your Azure subscription, which are part of a specific virtual network, and you only want access of the storage account from those virtual machines. So what you can do, you can just click on selected network and you can add that virtual network. So for example, if I want to do this, let me duplicate the screen for a moment because I need my virtual network information. So this is the VNet that I have, training RG VNet, and in that VNet this VM is. So I can actually select copy my virtual network and come here. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to restrict access of this storage account from my virtual network only. So I can click on add new virtual network here. I'm sorry, if I want to create a new virtual network, but I can add an existing network and I can select my network, which is training RG VNet. And then I can select the subnet because in this network, I only have one default subnet. So I can select the subnet and I can enable it. So what I'm doing right now, I'm enabling the access from this network only. Now only the resources or virtual machines from this network can access my storage account. The moment this setting is enabled, even if I keep the storage account access level at container level, you will still not be able to access it because now I've selected the network. So this is enabling it at this moment. And what it does in the backend, it creates a rule in the firewall. So it's enabled it. And you can add it now. So this has been added, right? You can also add your IP. For example, you still need the capability to access the storage account. So you can check this box that says add your client IP. The IP that you are seeing here, you all will see a different IP. That's the public IP of yours. So you can always check this box, add your client IP. Your public IP will also change. And say when you disconnect from the network and connect it again, your ISP, internet service provider, may allocate you a different IP address. So you can check this box, add your client IP address, which means your IP will, whatever IP your system gets will be able to access the storage account. Then comes IP address ranges. Now, if you have some specific ranges that you want to whitelist to access the storage account, you can enter them here. These ranges could be your office locations or maybe your vendor network. You can add all of it here. So that's something that you can do here. So these are some of the security related options for storage account. So I have made these changes. Now I will need to save it. So I will save these changes now. These changes are saved. And now the storage account will only be accessible to this virtual network and to this IP, which means now I'll go ahead and go to my storage account here and I'll go to the container. If you look at the access is public. I'll change the access level to container once again. Now the access level is public at the container level. You can, if you need to see what is the current access level, you can always see it here. For this one, log is private, this one is container. Now I'll just click on any of the documents. Oh, I cannot share this. For example, this test website HTML, and I'll copy it, put it into the chat window once again. Can you try and access it? See if you're able to access it.
Yeah, no, I can't. Not authorized.
Yep, you cannot, but I can. Why? Because I have given my IP, my client IP also access to this. See, I can access it. Though the container, though the access level is at the container, access level is public, but you still can't access it because in the firewall, I have put restrictions that this storage account or the content of this storage account should only be accessible from that virtual network, and whatever number of resources are there in that virtual network, they can access it, and my IP. Now, if I just remove that, I will still not be able to access it. For example, if I just go there into firewall and virtual network, see what will happen quickly. I'll go to the networking once again, and I'll remove my client IP, and I'll save it. Okay. Now I cannot access it also. I will lose access. So I'm saving it. Now I'll just refresh this page. See, I'm also not authorized now. This is my storage account. I am the admin, but I'm not able to access it because on the firewall, there is only one whitelisting which has been done at the virtual network layer. So only the virtual network and all the resources inside that virtual network can access the content of the storage account. I cannot access it. Now, if I go back to my storage account, see this behavior. If I go to the storage account, click on containers and click on testing, even I cannot see anything now. Is it making sense, guys? See, now I'm not able to see any of the data which is there in this container because I do not have access, though I am the administrator. That's how storage accounts or Microsoft Storage Service provides fine-grained access policy, that you can define access at the IP level, network level, client level, all those capabilities are there. Now, if I need my access restored, I will go back to the networking. That I can do because I am the owner of the subscription, and I'll quickly add my client IP here and save it once again. Then I will restore access to the storage account as well as the content. So now if I'll go to containers and click on testing, now I will be able to see all the data inside. It has not taken effect, so we just need to refresh it. Yep, I got it back. So this is on the access level. Is it making sense, guys?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So I'll revert the changes. I'll once again make it all network and save it. All right. So that's the firewall and virtual network. Now, what is this private endpoint? So private endpoint is another security feature. As I said, storage account has a public endpoint. Public endpoint means it is publicly accessible. People can access it if they have the right credentials, if they have been provided the access. Private endpoint is another feature. What happens if you create a private endpoint? It will disable the public endpoint of the storage account, which means now the storage account will only be accessible to the network that has been put into the firewall and virtual network. That's the private endpoint. We primarily create private endpoints in a production environment so that no administrator by accidentally change the storage account access level to container. So that's private endpoint. If you need to create it, we can quickly create it. In order to create a private endpoint, the storage account will belong to your network. And in order for it to belong to your network, it also needs an IP address. Storage account in the backend have a public IP address allocated to them by Microsoft. So what this private endpoint will do, it will disable that public IP address, which means nobody will be able to access the storage account over public internet. But the private endpoint will create a private IP for the storage account, and the only the resources from that network can access the storage account. So I'll show you how it happens. You can give it a name. Let's say you can put testing private endpoint. You can select the location, same location, East US, then it says resources. You can select the resource that you want to create a private endpoint for what? There are many services in the storage account. I'll say that I want to create it for blob. Then you go to the configuration, then it says, okay, you're going to create a private endpoint which will require an IP address to be allocated to this storage account, a private IP. So which network in subnet you want to get that IP from? So I'll select my network and I'll select my subnet. And then I can also integrate it with private DNS, which means if I have a DNS server, I can actually integrate it from here as well. So my DNS server will be this, link will be this. So this is my link name. Integrate with private DNS, no, yes, whatever. So my storage account, I can give a name to it also, and then click on tag, last option, and then review and create it. Now what is, if I just create it, what will happen? The storage account will get a private IP from my network and will only be accessible from my network. I would say from the virtual network. That's private endpoint is. This is a great feature, great security feature for storage accounts, which most of the most of the production environment you will find it. And there is a sure set questions that comes in Azure Administrator exam on private endpoint. You will find a couple of questions on private endpoint for storage account as well as for other services. Okay, so that part is completed. It's creating a private endpoint. Guys, did I talk about Azure subscription management in my previous sessions? How do we manage our subscription? How do we configure billing? How do we configure quotas? Did I talk about it? Henry?
No, Raghu, I think no.
Okay, I'll talk about it next topic then.
I'm not sure about the quotas, to be honest. I think Billy mentioned that only loosely.
No worries, I'd like to spend some time on this because that is very much important for you to know. You don't become an administrator unless and until you know how to manage your subscriptions. So that's very much important, guys. All right, so the private endpoint is created, and now the storage account is only, the storage account, since you've created the private endpoint for blob, the blob data is only accessible over that network. Let's move on to the next service. We'll not focus on queues and tables because these require applications. So typically in the exam, you only get questions from containers and file shares. Now let's talk about file share. So as I said, file share is similar to file servers that you provision on premises. And how do you provision file servers? There's a role in Active Directory file services. So you basically deploy that role on a server, then it becomes a file server. Here, everything is there. So let's quickly create a file share and I'll show you how to use it. So I'll click on file share and I'll create a file share. Testing. And again, as I said, it's all lowercase. Testing file share. Then it says file share performance, because on the file share, you are going to keep a lot of data. You're going to store a lot of data, and then you will allow access to multiple users. It could be in hundreds, thousands, or hundreds of thousands. So what kind of performance you need, depending on how much data will be accessed per second, you will select the performance. So performance is transaction optimized, hot and cold. Transaction optimized is the performance that if we select in the production environment, which means depending on how many users connect to the file share to access the data, please allow that transaction optimized. So this is the egress and ingress that you get, and maximum capacity of a file share is 5 terabyte. So that's the file share capacity. So let's create it. Now we have created the file share. This is my file share or a file server. Now I'll click on it, and similar to what I did in Blob, I can actually upload some data on this file share, and then I can actually create access this data. So example, I'll upload some data once again on the file share. So I'll upload official curriculum. Let's say I'll upload case study material. I'll upload test website. I'll upload division of responsibility. I'll upload networking basics. I'll upload KZ104. I'll upload planning Azure unit. So I'm uploading some data on my file share. Okay, the data is uploaded. Let's just imagine this is all the data that you have on the file share. Now, how do you access this data? Since this is a file share, you don't need to get the URL. This is your file share. Now, how do you access it? I'm not integrating it with Active Directory, which will take a lot of time. So this is the file share. Now, this is how I access the data. What I need some information before I create a network share. So I'll open a notepad. This is what I need. I need name of the storage account. I need access key and file share URL. 3 pieces of information I need if I want to grant access of this file share to any user in the world. When I say any user in the world. Okay. So name of the storage account I need. My storage account name is this. Raghuveer SA. Access key I need, and I need file share URL. Let's take this information. So when you click on properties, you will get the file share URL. That's the URL of the file share, which is https. See, it's secure. raghuveersa.file.co.windows.net, which is the URL, and this is the file share, testing file share. So you copy this URL. You copy this URL in your notepad. All right. So copy the URL. Then I need access key also. Access key is similar to a password. So how do I get the access key? I'll go to the storage account, and here I will get an option that says access key. I'll click on it, and I'll click on show access key. Right now these keys are hidden by default, and only the subscription owner or contributor or storage account contributor can access these keys, because these keys are nothing but the password or the lock to the storage account. So I'll click on show key, and this says key. I'll just copy the key. I'll copy the key. I can either copy the primary key or the secondary key 1 or key 2, whichever key, it doesn't make any difference. So I'll copy the key and save it. I'll put it on the notepad. Then I need name of the storage account, which I already have. So I've got these 3 information. Now, typically when you need to grant access to people to file shares or file servers, you basically share this 3 piece of information with your domain, a Wintel team, a Windows administration team, and they'll take care of it. But let's say you are the administrator and you need to take care of both the things. So you have got this information. Now you'll go to your local system, wherever you want to create a share for this storage account. So let's say my local system is my Azure VM or my own laptop. I can do it on my own laptop as well. You all can do it actually, and you can use my file share. Fine. So this is how you do it. Now we create a share in the user folder here. So so all the users who need access to the file server, what you can do, the system administrators can actually enable this. The users cannot do it by themselves because they will not have administrative right. So what you basically need to do, you will just go to that user's desktop or laptop. You will click on this PC or my computer, whatever option is there, depending on the OS. And then you click on map network drive, this option. Then it says map network drive. You will click on map network drive. You will see like this, what network drive you map. Then you select a drive letter. You can select any of the available drive letter. For example, I select H. Then you need to type the name of the file share. That's what you need to type. So name of the file share you already have in the notepad. Now, how do you need to type? You need to remove this HTTPS from here. This forward slash, you need to convert it into backslash. And this forward slash also becomes backslash. It has already given you the example that backslash server name, file share name, and then the shared folder. So I'll just copy it and put it here. That's I've done. This is the address I provided. Then it says finish. When I click on finish, it will try and connect to this file share. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, this is permissions issue. I believe I have not changed the permission of my storage account. Let me fix it real quick. I'll go to my storage account. I'll go to networking. Now it says all network. This private endpoint is causing issue. Remember, this private endpoint actually disables the public connectivity. So that's the reason I'll just quickly remove this private endpoint. But if my laptop was part of the same network, same domain network, for example, my corporate network, then I don't need to remove the private endpoint. But since my laptop is not part of the corporate network, my laptop is on a different network, the storage account is on a different network. That's the reason I have just removed it. I'll just double check under networking if everything is normal. Okay, all network. Private endpoints are not there. Great. Containers. And also the setting, this setting, container setting, the access level should also be changed. Okay, let's go back to my system. I'll go to this once again. I'm back. Now I'll click on finish and see the moment I click on finish, it is asking me for credentials. It is asking me for username and password. Is it also asking you for username and password, guys? If you're practicing it side by side. Right. So the username will be the storage account name that you have copied on the notepad. This is storage account name, and the password will be the access key. So this is how you use, and you can click on remember my credentials so that it doesn't ask you all the time, and you hit OK.
I was always wondering about that because I've in the past always just used the connect function on the storage, on the file
So it
sheet.
will work. It at times it creates some issues. Then it works because I've seen this.
Yeah,
Work.
and then it doesn't persist. You get that login, and I always wondered what that password was. So that's that's great.
I'll take the access key once again. I believe I could not copy it properly, so I copied it. Now I'll maybe that says the password incorrect. Okay. A specified network password is not correct. It's a known issue it happens with storage accounts.
I just usually use the PowerShell script to connect with that device.
Oh, yeah, you can use the PowerShell, but this also works here. I have done it, and as I said, you
Yeah,
try.
no, I never tried this way before. This is this is good.
This has some issues. This has some known issues. I would say it happens in one go, then it takes time. For example, I'm putting the right access key, but still it is not taking it. Let me put this key. It will work. I know it has worked in the past as well. Or I'll rotate the key for a moment. Name of the storage account is right, Raghuveer SA, with this. Oh, see, I'm making a mistake here. The name of the storage account is incorrect that I'm putting. I misspelled it. Raghuveer SA. Now it will work. It worked. And you can see, I have this network share here. Here's the network share. This is another storage account that I've put the share, which needs credential. This is testing file share, and say I have all the documents. So I can access any of those documents. I can in fact copy it on my local system. Right now, these documents are on the share. They are not preserved. They are not stored on my system. As soon as let's say this has been the scenario, now I rotate the key. Rotation means I change the key. See, I've just changed the key. I will lose access to my share now. So this is a security best practice. You should rotate the access keys once in 90 days. Or you can put a rotation reminder also, so that even if you have shared your storage account access with someone and the person is not working with you, or that vendor is no more providing you services, because of this feature, they will lose access to the data. So I've just clicked on it. If I just refresh it, I will also lose access. See, I just
Is there any way to automate the rotation of the key?
can you speak that again? I'm not.
So I was just asking, is there any way to automate the rotation of the key?
You want to automate?
Automate, yeah. Sorry, let me.
Yeah, you can automate. What you can do basically, I would say you can put these keys. I'm saying this set rotation reminder. You can put the rotation reminder here, and in fact of using the keys from here, you can put them into a key vault, and at the key vault level, you can actually put the automation. So what it does, what the key vault does, key vault will rotate your keys every 90 days, whatever rotation reminder you will put. This is only the reminder here, but in the key vault, you have the capability of automation. You do not have it here.
You have to, so you have to link it to a key vault.
Yep. And that's the way it is done always. Typically, the access to the storage account or access to the keys is not given to anyone other than the administrator. And what they do, they keep all the passwords, all the secrets, all the access keys in a key vault service. Azure as a key vault service, they keep everything there. and then they give access at the key vault level to the applications, to the workloads, and to the users. And they put all the automation at the key vault level.
Fair enough. Okay. Cool.
All right. And by default, as I said, the encryption is at Microsoft managed keys. So you can in fact use your own keys. It's just that you need to select a key vault here. And then that key vault, right now you don't have a key vault, so you need to create it here. And then you can manage the encryption from there, or you can in fact manage your HSM, which is a physical box, which is used to create keys. So these are the options. This is how you basically do it. For example, I've just rotated the keys. I'll click on access keys once again, and I'll show the key, copy this new key, and I'll go to my file share, which I've just lost access to, double click on it, and it will ask me for the key. It says the connection has been restored. Okay. It will just ask me for the key. I need to reboot my system then if it is not asking. As I said, these are some common scenarios. So typically the keys are rotated once in 90 days as per the security best practices, and all the devices which are referencing to that key needs to be updated. So that's the option that you need to follow. Okay. Then comes the shared access signature. So let's say you want to share access to your vendor. So you can follow the same option. You can in fact share the URL with them, and then you can change the public blob label, or you can actually share the document or share the storage with them, share the repository with them for a specific period of time. You can select it here, for example, the start and expiry date. When do you want to start it? When do you want to end it? And you can create the shared key, and you can also share it with them. So for example, you want to share some object, you can click on object, select the object here, and select the information. Just give me 1 minute here. Okay, so once again, let me explain this to you. So let's say you want to share access, you want to share some documents, objects, or the entire container with someone, with one of your vendor for certain point in time. Or let's say your vendor wants to share some information with you. Your vendor has some data that they want to upload in the storage account. How do you give them access to your storage account? This is the process. So you can select what you want to give them access to. You can select what you want to give them access to. Let's say you want to give them access to a blob service. Then what you want to give access, let's say you want to give them access to a container. You can select the container here. Then allowed permissions. What kind of permissions you want to give them? You want to give them read, write, delete permissions. So typically, if you want them to upload some data on your storage account, share something with you, you will give them write permissions only. So write permissions, you will give them. Then blob versioning, that's okay. Read, write. Then you can select the time frame. Let's say I want to give them permission from tomorrow, 25th, to 26. For this period of time, you can select the time zone, and then you put their IP address. This is where you need to put your vendor's public IP address, the one that they are using in their network. You just put the public IP address here. For example, this. You put a public IP address here. Then allowed protocols, HTTPS only, which means they should only be able to access this container in this storage account from this public IP address on secure channel. And you can create a generate SAS token and connection string. So this is generated. This is the connection string. This is the SAS token. Now what your vendors need to do, your vendors will just, you will just share this information with them, copy this information, service URL and share it with them. If they are trying to access it, this information from this public IP, then only they will be able to access it. All right. So this is how you give access. Now let's say I want to show you how I want to give you access. For example, I'll go to my container. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, Raghu.
Okay, so I'll go to my, let's say I want to give you access to one of my documents. So let's say this division of cloud responsibility one, I'll click on it. And here it says generate SaaS. I can also generate it from here because I want to give you access to a specific document only. If I want to give you access to the entire container, I can select at the container level. So I'll click on SaaS. Then it says signing method. How will you sign in? Using the key. So sign in key one, permissions I can give you. These are the permissions that I'm giving you on this document. So I can give you read permissions. Then I can give you tell that when that permission expires. So this is the time frame, and I can put your public IP. So can you give me your public IP, any of you, and I'll give you permission, and then you will be able to access this document for that time frame only. Can I get public IP from anyone? If you need to know your public IP in the browser, just type what is my public IP? What is my IP? You will get your public IP. Okay, so I got it from Dinesh. I'll just copy it. And I'll put the IP address of Dinesh. That's it. Generate SaaS token. It just generated, and this is the URL. I'll just copy it, and Dinesh, I'll share it with everyone, but only Dinesh will be able to access it.
In the allowed IP addresses, is that a list like you can kind of separate it or something like that, or?
Henry, you need to be a bit louder. I was just not able to get you.
Okay, I said in the allowed IP addresses, is it a comma separated IP list?
Yep, you can do that. If there are multiple IPs, no, let me see. I have not checked it because typically you have only one public IP. Let me try with.
Is that better? Is that better for the microphone?
Yep, that is now good.
Yeah, microphone had switched to my laptop, which was miles away. Sorry about that.
No, so that's not allowed. You can only put one public IP.
Okay.
So I put the public IP for Dinesh.
Yes.
Dinesh, were you able to access it?
Raghu, I have given the public IP for my Azure, that domain controller VM, but
No,
look,
no.
I have blocked.
For your laptop. The
Yeah.
client.
Okay. Okay.
I need your client IP, not.
Okay.
Even if you
Okay.
public IP for your domain controller VM, you can access this from your domain controller.
Okay. So this is my client laptop IP address.
Right. Because in this URL, says URL, your IP address is appended.
Appended. Yeah.
That's the reason. So only this IP will have access to. Now, what is this IP? 106.213.
Yeah. So this is my local laptop public IP address.
Okay. I will need to generate the token then once again.
Okay.
I'll delete this and recreate it then. Example, this test website. I'll generate the test open and I'll put your IP address now and generate the token. Now I'll share it with you, Dinesh. I'm actually sharing it with everyone, but only you will be able to access it. So if you just type this URL in your browser, you will be able to access the document. See, I'm typing it, I'm not authorized because my IP, because if you look carefully, in the address, the IP is appended as the IP. Only this public IP can access this document, nobody can else.
I'm getting the same error, Raghu, the XML error which you are getting. I'm getting the authorization failure.
No, that cannot happen for you. Your IP is, which means then this is not your IP.
Yeah, this is my IP. If you see,
See, as an, I am the administrator for the subscription for the storage account and I'm not able to access it. It proves that this access is only applicable to this IP. And if you're not able to,
yeah, I
that's
agree.
not your IP. So even if you're not able to access it, maybe there is some issue with your IP, but in a production environment, the corporates, they know their public IPs. Those public IPs are provided by ISPs and they are static public IPs. They don't change. Our public IPs may change. If your connection, if there's an intermittent connection, if something changes at the ISP end, your public IP keeps changing. But for a corporate, their public IPs remain the same because they purchase those public IPs and they pay for them. So that's how you basically do it. So this is one method of sharing access with people. Any question on this?
No, I didn't know you could do that with the blobs. I've seen the SAS before when you want to move a disk across subscriptions or
Yeah.
or tenants even.
Yep. But you can do it for the blob as well because that option
But
is,
yeah,
yeah. You can do it for containers. You can do it for file shares. I would say you can do it for all the Azure services.
That's
All
good.
the services which are in storage account, but it is not there from day one. I'm saying they enabled this functionality for blobs first, then they expanded it to the container and other capability level. So they keep on expanding the capabilities.
Okay.
All right. So that's on the now a couple of more options that I can talk about that you need to know. Example, object replication. You can set up the replication rules. I will say you can replicate the data of the storage account to another storage account. That's one of the feature which is available. So create replication rules for your organization. You can select the destination subscription and you can select the destination storage account. So source and destination, because I'm selecting the same storage account, so it's saying source and destination cannot be same. So you can actually replicate data to another storage account also for the redundancy or backup perspective. That option is also available that they've enabled it. Life cycle management is another option. So you can create a rule here, and you can actually create a rule that what will happen. So, for example, I can create a rule, sample rule, and this rule applies to all the blobs in my storage account. These are the type. Then I go to next, and I say, okay, this is the rule. So it says that this last modify, if there's a blob, if there's a any blob which is last modify more than enter a value. So let's say if it was last modified in 30 days, then the rule is either delete the blob. I would say if nobody has modified the blob or that document in the last 30 days, delete it or move to archive, move to core. So that's how you put the automation. So I can keep it like move to cool storage. So I have created a rule that if there is a document, if there is an object in my storage account, which has not been modified in the last term, which has not been modified for more than 30 days, it will move to cool storage. Then I add another rule, which is that specific object remains in cool storage, let's say for 60 days. And if nobody is actually modifying it, accessing it for more than 60 days, then move it to archive storage. And I can add this rule. So I can set this policy. Now, because of this policy, I will be able to save a lot of money. All the data that has not been used or accessed in the last 30 days will be moved to cool storage, and I will get some saving. And 60 days later, it will be moved to archive storage. I will get more saving. That's the life cycle policy, which is also available. So that's the other feature that you can do. Now, if you want to see the difference in price, you will be surprised to see the difference in the storage prices. So here's the pricing calculator, storage accounts. I've added. I'll go to the view and see. This is, let's say I see block storage, standard, general purpose V2, LRS. If the tier is hot, let's say for 100 GB of data, I basically pay $2 a month, $2.08 a month. This is US dollar for 100 GB of data. Imagine how cheaper the cost of storage account is in Azure, cost of storing data in Azure is. 100 GB of data I'm storing, and I'm only paying $2 for that 100 GB of data. And also, if I want to perform some write operations, basically I keep on adding and remove data. So I can also select write operations. Let's say, typically I will perform 100 write operations in a month, or maybe 1,000 write operations in a month. That's the write operations cost. If you just upload data once and forget about it, then it is only $2.08 per month. But if you are performing, if you continue to add more data, write data, then this is the write operations. Then list and create container operations. These are by default values. And so if you look at the price, your total price comes $52. But if you just exclude the write operations for a moment and you say that I will only upload it once and then I don't access it. That's for the hot tier, $2 only for 100 GB of data. Let's make it 1024, which is 1 terabyte of data. So 1 terabyte of data is $2, $21 in hot. If I keep the same data in cool tier, see, I'm only paying $15.56. And if I keep the same data in archive tier, $1 per month. Look at this cost. Imagine 1 terabyte of data you are storing in cloud at $1 per month only. However, there's a catch. This is archive. If you need to access this data, you will need to move it to the cool tier or hot tier, then only you can access it. So when you select tier of storage account for keeping any type of data, you need to be very careful because you may end up paying more than saving money on that strategy. And this is pay as you go price, guys. If I just tell you, if you take reservation that, okay, I will keep the same amount of data for next 1 year or 3 years, the price will be like this. Can I change something? 3 year reserved. Okay, well, I made it 1 petabyte now. So that basically what happens, there are some terms and conditions. If you want to take 3 year reservation, the minimum data that you need to keep is 1 petabyte. That's the reason it changed. Let's say for 1 year, what it is. So minimum reservation that you can take for storage is 1 petabyte or 100 terabyte, not 1 terabyte. But that's also a good option because I have seen organizations having petabytes of data, petabytes of backup data, and when they migrate to Azure, they had to leave the data behind, but they actually need it. So this is the solution for them. So storage is cost effective. To summarize this, guys. All right, that was all about storage account in Azure. It has more when when you just go through all of these options, you will learn more about it.